Hey everybody, Braden here. Welcome back to another episode of the Road to Chess Mastery. Today we are going to be covering game number 3 in my 10th tournament. I am currently 1 out of 2, and now I am playing with the white pieces against Derek. Let's see how the game progresses, shall we? I played e4. Okay, nothing new. c5, knight f3. You already know what I'm going to go for. I'm going to go for d4. And we see e6. So this is something that we haven't really talked about too much. We've talked a lot about d6 as that has been a regular thing we've been seeing as white and as black. And I've been going into the mainline knight off with bishop to g5. However, e6 is a little bit different. e6, the ideas are, well, d6, it's a very good move, but the whole theoretical point of e6 is, well, you want to play d5 in the Sicilian. e6 simply prepares d5, while also allowing this bishop on f8 to sometimes go to c5, especially after the move d4, which is one of the more challenging approaches here. Knight c6, knight c3. This isn't what happened in the game, but this is very common and definitely a possibility of what can occur. But after d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, we see a6 first. A6 is perfectly fine, though it is arguable that maybe knight to c6 is a bit of a better try. We're after knight to c3, queen to c7. But alright, that's pretty much limited. That's pretty much all I know for the Sicilian con, even now. It's not one of my stronger openings. Anyways, knight takes d4, a6. Now I played c4, and the whole point of c4 is you want to control the d5 square, and you want to prevent d5 as much as possible. Though the thing is, especially in the Sicilian con, getting a c4 and e4 is a lot more tricky than it would be, for example, after d6, because this bishop can be annoying on the c5 or just a7 to g1 diagonal. As normally in these positions, when you do play c4, e4, you play f3 and even b3. Which can severely weaken the dark squares. But after c4, we see queen to c7, knight to c3, just defending the e4 pawn and also developing. It's not a bad move at all. We see knight to f6, attacking the e4 pawn. Bishop to e2, just preparing castles. Bishop to b4. So this is a very nice move. The whole point of this is, well, they're trying to provoke me into playing the move f3. However, in this position, I was happy to play f3. The whole point is I can't play bishop f3 because c4 is hanging. But I am pretty happy, or I was happy to play f3, even though it weakens this diagonal, and this can be a very big issue for me later on. This was something I was happy to go into because, again, normally, especially if you play these positions, you'll see these commonly against the accelerated dragon or in positions with d6 instead. And I was quite happy with those positions, so I was thinking it'd be roughly the same. After castles, and bishop d6, it's a little different. The thing is, you would love to play a move like knight b5 here. It doesn't work for several reasons. The first reason is because you can take it, and after takes, there's queen to c5 check at the very least, where you can move your bishop back, or you can play bishop to c5 check and move your queen away. On either side here. And this is a very important feature of the position, is where, unfortunately, my king is on g1, so there's a check, and I'm not winning material here. However, it is desirable. And that is one thing that king h1 actually sets up. I did not play this in the game, though it was in my radar, and it was the first thing I looked at when I was looking back on this game, before I started analyzing it today. Is what if king h1? The whole thing is, if bishop takes h2, you actually have this crazy move f4. Unfortunately, knight b5 doesn't really make too much sense. You can really just take it and go queen g3. And surprisingly, you should be able to keep the piece even though it's very, very sketchy, and worst case scenario, even if you lose it, it won't be that bad. But unfortunately, a move like queen to h4 and bishop g3 is coming, and it's actually close to mating for white, for black, sorry. So, okay, f4, is what I ended up playing instead. But actually, before we go into that, we should talk about why f4 is actually winning for white. And the whole reason is because after bishop g3, we have this move queen to d3. Bishop to h4, there's g3, and we trap the bishop. But okay, it's not that easy. What if e5? Well, after king takes, pawn takes the knight, and queen takes the knight, even though it's equal material, the problem here is we should look at the centers. We need to look at the imbalances in the position. I have the bishop pair. This is an open position, so that favors white. My queen is better placed than their queen. Their knight is equal to my knight, I'd say. My bishop is better than their bishop. My bishop is better than their knight. Again, I have the bishop pair, and my center is much stronger. They have a weakness on d7. That will be a permanent problem, and by weakness, I mean something that their pawns will have to protect, not their pieces. So that's very unfortunate. But as you can see, there are a lot of pros in this position for white, and unfortunately, there's not too many redeeming qualities for black. Okay, let's go back to the game. I played f4 immediately, threatening e5, trying to get some dark square control. I think this is reasonable how to play. Unfortunately, my opponent did not make the right move here. They played e5. I think this makes sense, but also it's not the right approach. Unfortunately, I do have the move knight to f5, and now we can see that all of a sudden these dark squares are actually quite weak, and especially the square maybe later on, as we'll see. But after bishop c5, king h1, it is very difficult in this position for black. It looks like it's good, but it's just not, because the reason why it looks like it's good is this bishop looks good, but this bishop's still not in the game. All of my pieces are just ready to play. As you can see, this knight on f5 is just beautiful, and unfortunately, my opponent blunders with the move d6. However, I did not punish this correctly. F takes e5 is the right move, where after d takes e5, I played knight to d5. I thought that after takes and takes, which is what happened in the game, I thought I had a reasonable position where I can get the bishop pair, and I'd be quite happy here. But the bishop pair isn't really important here. Instead, what's more important is that we can force the win of a pawn in this position. Very surprising, but we need to ask ourselves how our pieces and their pieces coordinate. Especially when you have a position like this, you really need to calculate, and it's something that I just failed to do, and I think it is something that everyone should work on, including me, especially me. I need to work on sitting in a position where I definitely have an advantage and trying to find out if I can find any concrete lines to, well, push that advantage as far as I can. And the way I can do this is by taking on g7. Very surprising, but of course, if they can't take, then we just won a very crucial pawn, and we're nearly winning. We took one of the best defending pawns of their king, and if we can just move back, well, then they're just missing the g-pawn. We're up a clean pawn, and we have an attack. We're up the pawn and the compensation, as Yasser Sarah has once said. But okay, after knight takes, king takes, and what's the follow-up here? Well, there's rook takes f6. As we can see here, if we reverse the move order, I play knight to d5 immediately. It attacks the knight and the queen. However, what we should have done is reverse the move order. What if we can remove this piece and play knight d5? And the way we can do this is actually just by, well, taking and taking on f6. And king takes f6, well, there's just knight to d5. And if they move away or do anything else, for example, it doesn't really matter what, maybe in like knight d7 or something. I'm not saying that's a good move. I'm just saying if that's played, just move back. And we're up a pawn, and this is, again, a crucial pawn to defend their king, and they're in serious trouble here. But okay, d takes e5, knight d5, unfortunately, so I missed the idea. Knight takes d5, c takes d5, and bishop takes f5. I think this was the right choice, for sure, just because, well, that knight on f5 is just a great piece, so you want to remove your opponent's best piece, and you want to especially do that with one of your worst pieces, and the bishop on c8 wasn't really doing much, so bishop takes f5, especially when we look at how many moves this knight made. right? Knight to f3, knight to d4, two moves, a third move. So this bishop made one move to take this knight. It wasn't developed at all. So essentially when they take, you can argue that they're ahead on time now. Though white does still have a concrete slight advantage here. Knight to d7, bishop to g5, rook a to c8, and rook to c1. Things are a lot more tricky now, unfortunately. Queen d6, queen to f1, h6. And unfortunately, I was playing on the wrong side of the board here. There's not really anything here for white anymore. It looks like there might be, but realistically, this unfortunately was just grasping at straws. I thought I still had something because, well, I had such a great position before. What happened? And now you need to reevaluate. Unfortunately, I don't have the advantage I used to have, and I should be treating this position like a completely new one. Something Karpov was really good at. He would just play the position. He wouldn't care about what happened before. He was especially good at that. But realistically, what I should have done here is eventually just retreat this rook. And after bishop h4, bishop b3, I should not have taken on c8. This was a crucial mistake if rook to b1. It is a bit tricky because bishop to f4 is something I was scared of. But everything should be okay after bishop g4. I think this is worthy of an exclam. Only for the point of that it's not an easy move to think about because you win a pawn for sacrificing an exchange. So it's not quite obvious and it's a bit difficult to play, but after g6, sacrificing the exchange and winning the f4 pawn. g5 immediately draws, so this is not something black would want to do. Yeah, so this is just not something black would ever want to go into, just because, well, that makes no sense. But move like king h7 and even bishop f6 or something. And we are down 1 point in material, but it's roughly even. There's a lot of compensation for white, and play can continue. Though this is something I would still be very scared to go into, just because, well, look at the position, right? We're down the exchange here. But again, this is much better than what happened in the game, as we'll see. After bishop e3, I played rook takes c8 and I was ready to grovel. And we'll see how after rook c8. I played bishop g3, preventing any bishop f4 stuff. And the whole point is bishop f4, I can take it. And if g6 or something, I can just take on e5, attacking the queen. And then I can retreat my knight and I'll be okay. But of course, that's not so easy. It's easier said than done. After this, f6, and again, rook f3 is really the only choice, so that's what I played. But now we see rook c1, and we see the whole point of what I'm talking about with groveling here, is we're just going to be in a very sad position, where we have to play bishop to d1. It's really the only move, and we're going to try to unravel, but it's going to take a lot of time. Bishop d4. I played b3. I think realistically I should have just gone maybe queen to e2, where they can take, but this lets me play something like rook to f1 and bishop to b3, and this kind of lets me unravel a little bit. The whole point of bishop to b2 is if I take, then there's rook takes d1 with checkmate, or with checkmate in a few moves. But b3, yeah, this just wastes a lot of time. Now knight c5, and we can see the issues creeping in. Bishop f2, trying to just trade off this piece, but realistically, we're just losing the pawn on e4. When we lose e4, we're losing d5, and this is exactly what happens. Rook c2, rook a1, keeping up the pressure on the pin. Queen to d3, not threatening e4. I think this is important to note, because if we were to take on e4, then there's rook takes d1. Queen to b6, going for more concrete lines. Queen to f3. I knew this was losing at this point. I saw a direct loss here. I was hoping my opponent just wouldn't see it, but of course my opponent did. Knight to f2, rook takes f2, and queen takes f2. The whole point here is, well, we're not actually defending the f2 square here. So this just won the exchange. And the whole point is after queen takes f2, rook d1, queen g1, they can trade off all the material. They're up a point of material, and d5 will fall. As we will see after king f7, king f2, king e7, king e3, and the important move f5. which covers the e4 square, and I tried one last attempt with g4, hoping for something, but realistically there's nothing here. And my opponent just played g6, and I resigned because, well, I'm kind of sick of this position, and even to this day, just nasty, gross. But yeah, so I think the important things we should definitely take away from this game were that we need to look for more concrete tactics, and we need to make sure when we have such good pieces here, because realistically all of our pieces are better than our opponents, we need to look for concrete ways to show that advantage, especially with winning material, because having a good position is only having a good position. A good position can fade away. Having a material advantage is a lot harder to lose, as long as you're very safe with your play. If you're up a pawn or two, then, well, if you just don't lose that pawn or two, then it's a lot more difficult to actually lose. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, but I think the whole point is you need to look for ways to win material, especially in these types of positions. And it's something that I was just not skilled at doing, and it's definitely still one of my flaws in playing chess. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in game number 4. Thank you for watching, and I'll have a good one. Bye.